Hello there. This is Mr. Turek. I'm gonna go do a really brief, kind of quick overview of Unit 6, which covers traditional subject matter and a naturalistic approach to subject matter. For this unit, you have an awful lot of options, and the way it's organized is it's organized in the traditional hierarchy of genres for painting. I'll get more into that later, but just sort of look over this and kind of soak in your variety of options here. For each particular category or genre of painting, there is sometimes several options, sometimes there's only one. I'm very open to other suggestions for each category, since this unit is kind of in its narrow focus. It's kind of flexible. You can kind of do a lot with it. So as I go over each category, I will kind of talk about some of your other options that may not be listed in this set of options here. Now, before we get into anything about the projects for this unit, I just want to say, I just want to kind of clarify what I mean when I say naturalism. Naturalism is just the simplest, most realistic way to depict the world around you. You shouldn't really confuse it, though, with realism, because reality for different people can mean different things. Like your reality may be, you may be colorblind. For other people, it may mean that, it's a bit twisted, or, the reality can be kind of a slippery term. Natural, or nature, sorry, is concrete. It's outside of you. So when I say naturalism, I mean as that object appears to both of us, not just you, which realism can kind of mean kind of a narrow thing. It can be just exactly what I see. Naturalism kind of, I think, eliminates that and sort of makes it sort of a agreed upon thing. Like we all kind of agree that naturally the sun is positioned at the center of the universe and the earth rotates around the sun. That is just the way it is in nature. You can't really argue with that. Okay. And then there's, I'm going to refer to maybe at times the traditional hierarchy of genres and tradition in a sense. And a large majority of art history was, painting was done in this sort of traditional hierarchy. Like there were still life painters, and then there were portrait painters, and the portrait painters were paid better and a little bit more important than the still life painters for a long time. And as you go over each category, there's a deep history behind each category, and it's not something I necessarily get into because you kind of have to wait for college to get that specialized. But that's kind of what I mean is, the lower paintings in the hierarchy, the ones I sort of introduced first, are the easiest kinds of paintings to do. They don't require as much intellectual and technical effort as the paintings in the hierarchy that higher up in the hierarchy. And you should know what hierarchy means, just kind of an organization of importance. So like, like at a school, the hierarchy would be, there's the principal, and then under him is the assistant principals, and then under her or him, there's, the dean of students, and, various department heads, and then below them are, the teachers, and then below that is the students or the parents or whatever. So, that's a hierarchy, and that's kind of what I'm going to construct here in the next couple of slides. For any of these projects, I want you to, and I want your goal to be, your objective to be to depict the subject in the most naturalistic, realistic way possible. This is solely of technical concern, and it can be frustrating for some who get caught up in it, but that's kind of the focus of this unit. That is the sole purpose of this unit, is to hone your naturalism, hone your way of depicting reality and nature as it is and not as you want it to be. So it's in philosophical or aesthetic terms, it's mimesis. which means to mime or copy nature. And it's an art philosophy that's long since kind of gone out of fashion, but still is kind of valid and is still in demand. You can only depict what comes from nature, and I realize that the other demand here is objects that are handmade. I know that's, while technically anything made in a factory is by way of indirect way kind of made by hand, but essentially what I want you to limit yourself to is just nature, just what's out in the world. And I don't want your skill to be visible. You need to be so technically accurate, or try to be as technically accurate as possible, to the point where your hand, your style is not apparent. It's not about you. It's about what your subject looks like compared to reality. So you're sort of struggling here to get rid of any tics you have. Everything you do in your painting's composition, and everything you do with your technique should glorify and depict the subject to the best of your abilities. It's really not about your viewpoint on the world. That comes in through the choices you make of subject and how you arrange that. If you can arrange it and depict it well, that is where your value comes as a traditional or naturalistic painter. If you can paint really super realistically, that increases your value. People will hire you to paint portraits. And that's kind of what you're focusing on in this unit. Your first and perhaps the easiest set of options here is the still life. The still life is at the bottom of the hierarchy, simply because intellectually it's just the easiest. You arrange objects on a table and you paint them for a still life. The objects don't move as long as you have the same lighting setup. They look the same from day to day. And for the most part, these were smaller paintings that were cheap and easy to come by, paintings that anybody could afford. You didn't have to be a king to buy these, so they were always sort of the lowest of the low in terms of the kinds of paintings you could make as an artist. But there were quite a few artists throughout history that made their living on this. The choices here are actually increase in difficulty, and they're all actually part of the same sort of technique. So a grisaille, the first choice you have is this painting on the left hand side here. That would be the underpainting for any kind of glazed painting or a trompe l'oeil painting. And the reason I offer it as an option here is because perhaps in your monochromatic painting or your value painting you did not choose to do a monochromatic still life, so now is your chance to do that. And then if you did do one and it was kind of sloppy, because I'm not concerned with the form on that particular painting, I'm concerned with you making the range of values, this is your chance to really start to hone your draftsmanship with your painting. And this painting should be your attempt at making the most realistic depiction of just the basic values of the objects. You can notice even in this grisaille on the left here that they've got the different textures of the different objects down. Like the onion looks semi-shiny but not super shiny like the metallic pot, and then the cloth has a completely different set of concerns along with the leaves. That's a chief concern when you're doing glazing or trompe l'oeil. Glazing is simply a reference, and that's your second choice. Glazing is a reference to the way paint is layered. So if you did a grisaille, you would layer on your color after that, and that would give it that kind of sense of realism. Glazing doesn't necessarily have to be 100% real, and typically it has some kind of deceit. Like the background is never really truly the background, it's just a solid color. But the opposite is true for trompe l'oeil, which is your last choice. And trompe l'oeil simply means that it tricks the eye, and that's kind of what that is in French. Trompe l'oeil paintings have a complete sense of space. Like usually they're objects depicted on a physical object like a door, or they're in a little cubby, or there's like a curtain visible. So all trompe l'oeil paintings sort of give you the illusion that they're realistic, like they're actually literally there. And this was a very popular form of painting, and I believe the 18th and 17th centuries. Often it would depict hunting gear and game, and it was just kind of a clever sort of style of painting. Painters would sometimes try to trick each other into thinking how you know, wow, look how real this is. Sometimes paint little flies on their paintings. So if you ever look at these in a museum, look around for a fly. Often there's a fly on there. So these are your choices for still life. For the animal painting, this is the next step up on the hierarchy. Animals, of course, being live subjects, but you know, not nearly as important as people, or grand a subject as landscapes. So they just kind of get stuck here. The option I have available is an animal portrait in watercolor. And if you haven't done watercolors up to this point, I'm just sort of kind of adding this in here to sort of force you into that and sort of get you thinking about that as kind of a potential medium or option. If you haven't done it, it'll get you out of your comfort zone and get you doing this. I'm open to other suggestions for this category though. So if you want to do traditional animal painting in a different media or a different kind of style, or if you look up traditional animal paintings and say, hey, I kind of want to imitate this artist or do one in this style, I'm perfectly fine with that, so long as it fits into the traditional natural sort of objective of this unit. For landscape painting, you have a couple of options. I'm very open with this category as well. You can do a Bob Ross landscape. Bob Ross, of course, very famous for his step-by-step videos of sort of like a kind of plein air style with sort of impressionistic roots. He's very, very clever in how he uses his brush strokes. So if you follow one of his videos and make one of his paintings, it's not really traditional in the sense, but you know, you'll still learn some valuable techniques and kind of have fun with it. You could do that if you want. You can also do a barn watercolor painting. This project I just sort of made to introduce watercolor techniques. You don't have to do a barn. You can do any landscape in watercolor. Again, I'm trying to get you out of your normal, like if you've just been using acrylics or oils, I want to get you out of your normal way of thinking. And then the last project, of course, is the O'Keeffe flower painting. Again, trying to get you to use watercolors and just giving you another option. Landscape painting sometimes can include, you know, depictions of plants or nature as is in various capacities. It doesn't necessarily have to be a building or a giant, you know, romantic vista. Some landscape painters depicted, you know, a common country road with a tree hanging over it, or, you know, simple things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, super complex. But as you can see in all of these are pretty naturalistic, pretty to the point. So again, there's your options for landscape painting. Genre painting. Actually, genre, the word means genres, like different styles or subject matter. And then the genre of genre painting was just called that. It was just called genre painting. What it depicted was scenes from everyday life. And kind of started with the Dutch, really, or got really prominent and famous, and lots of paintings were made in this style in the Dutch Baroque era, or Golden Age, I guess. And on the right-hand side here, we see a Vermeer, which if you know anything about Vermeer, you know, he's just kind of a master of this particular style. You can just tell from the sense of light here, that's kind of what I'm concerned with. If you're going to depict a scene from everyday life, the one project I recommend is just doing an interior. I do require that you use natural window light and pose the painting for yourself. Vermeer probably, when he painted this, would have had the milkmaid, you know, stand at that exact same window in that exact same dress for days on end until he finished. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can pose a photo if you want, but I need you to pose the photo, and I highly recommend you use natural light and do just sort of like a simple everyday scene, you know. Maybe it's a bit non-traditional in that it's a scene from something contemporary in life, but then, you know, you could switch over to the contemporary unit if you want to kind of do that. So for here, you know, just keep it quiet, keep it simple. That's all I'm kind of looking for this in this project. Now we're to portrait painting, and unlike the interior painting or genre painting, portrait painting kind of is higher up because you're sort of concerned with the likeness of the person. In a genre painting, it didn't really matter if that person devolved into some sort of like kind of broad category of, oh, that looks like a person or a human, really. You know, now portrait painting was concerned now in has always been concerned with, like, oh, is it that particular person? Is it Susan? Is it Joe? Is it John? Does it look like that friend I know? You know, it's more specific. It's more challenging, and this particular project is called How to Paint a Portrait, and it just includes a lot. If you look at the individual PowerPoint for it, it just includes a lot of like step-by-step kind of processes. And I want you, if you pick this particular project, to do some research on your own as to how to paint a portrait, how to make flesh tone, and really practice making flesh tones and sort of drawing your subject before you get into the paint part of it. Because you should pick somebody particular. You should pick an actual person, and I hope you shoot your own photo, like I think the project recommends, and I hope you kind of just, you know, struggle to depict that person. That is what I would be expecting with this. A likeness, not just a generic, oh, that looks somewhat human. The last genre here is the hardest and most demanding of all of the genres. And I do not expect you guys to do this at all, ever. I just sort of included it because it's part of the hierarchy, and, you know, maybe you do want to do kind of ambitious work. You're completely welcome to do it, but it's an extremely difficult challenge. History painting was the pinnacle of an artist's achievement. Very large work, depicted often a famous scene from contemporary history or mythological or biblical history, and often, you know, just dozens of subjects, and in a giant pose. And artists, before making these, would have to spend months and days making sketches and doing cartoons, which is a life-size sketch or two-scale sketch of people, and composition sketches, and then color studies, and then, you know, after that they would, you know, spend countless hours mapping it out on the canvas and painting it until it met those exacting degrees of like craftsmanship. And these paintings, when they were submitted to like the salon or competitions or bought and sold, they were bought and sold by, you know, like the most famous painters of to our knowledge, you know, the guys who are experts. You know, you had to have some serious skill to be able to survive in this category if you wanted to make money at it. Kings would buy your paintings, you know, churches would buy your paintings if they were history paintings. It wasn't just, you know, some guy with a house. You know, that guy with the house, that merchant, you know, he could only really afford like a still life. He couldn't afford something like this or hope to house it or have a house big enough for it. So this is your last option. Take a look through any of these PowerPoints on the website if you're interested in any of these particular choices. Again, consult me before you start any particular project, and I recommend you start easy and work your way hard. If you do want to skip around, you know, talk with me about it, kind of get your bearings first before you dive headfirst into something super ambitious.